Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into a slower world. One with no screens, no clocks, and absolutely no urgent emails. Just the soft flicker of an oil lamp, the warm scent of steamed bamboo, and the quiet splash of water by the village pond. Tonight, you'll become a humble papermaker in Tang Dynasty China around the 8th century. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a day doing this job. But don't worry, you're just here to imagine it. No need to soak your arms in lye or haul buckets up a muddy slope. Just close your eyes, breathe, and drift into this paper-scented dream. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before the sun, not because of an alarm clock, but because a pale light has begun to sneak through the oiled paper windows. In the distance, a rooster calls, its voice softened by the morning mist rolling over the rice paddies. You stretch slowly on your bamboo mat, listening to the creak of old wood beneath your back. Today is another quiet day in your quiet life. You, a papermaker just south of Loyang. No one remembers your full name except your oldest customers, who affectionately call you Old Silkworm, like the little creatures that spin cocoons. And really, that name fits just fine. You shuffle into the courtyard. A faint trace of lime powder lingers in the air from yesterday's batch. The soaking pool for bamboo pulp is still and smooth, reflecting a pale sky untouched by sun. You scoop cool water from a rain barrel and splash it on your face. It's colder than tea, sharper than wind, and wakes you up better than anything else. You love mornings most of all. Before the furnace crackles, before customers knock, before the bamboo presses start creaking like old bones. You have just a few minutes, precious and quiet, to observe the world. A sparrow hops from the roof to the edge of the water jar. A single bamboo leaf spins lazily as it floats on the pond. Inside your little workshop, really just a bamboo shed with some packed earth walls, everything is already in its place. Knives, soaking tubs, drying racks, a pair of worn-out wooden molds, and your favorite brush made from horsehair. A stack of freshly pressed sheets leans near the stove, still carrying the warm scent of sun, smoke, and fiber. You begin the day's work with a familiar rhythm, peeling apart a bundle of bamboo strips you'd soaked last week. Each piece is soft, slightly slimy, and needs to be crushed, slowly, by hand, using a stone block. No machines, just your strength and the memory in your muscles. You think back to your very first day doing this, the ache in your fingers, the burning in your shoulders. You couldn't sleep that night from the soreness. But now, years later, it's all become a quiet dance. Every motion smooth, every beat gentle. The bamboo turns into mush, then into a cloudy paste, which you pour into a wide wooden vat. You pause for a moment, watching the way light reflects off the surface. It shimmers, like moonlight caught in tea. Then, you lift your frame, a wooden mold strung with fine mesh, and lower it into the vat. Your hands, practiced and patient, move it side to side, evenly spreading the pulp until a thin, perfect layer forms. You hold your breath as you lift it out. If it's uneven, the whole sheet is ruined. But this one, it's smooth, glistening, and just the right thickness. Someone knocks at the outer gate. You wipe your hands on your apron and slide the door open. It's the young monk from Tiantai Temple. He visits often, always polite, always with a little gift. Today it's a small bundle of black beans, still warm. In exchange, you hand him 3 fresh sheets from yesterday's batch, thicker ones, ideal for copying sutras in bold, oily ink. When he leaves, you sit by your doorway, snacking on the beans and watching dust motes drift in the morning light. You wonder where these papers will go. Perhaps a traveling poet will write a verse on one. Perhaps an official in the capital will use it to tally grain taxes. Or maybe it'll simply be used to wrap a meat bun. You don't mind. That's the fate of paper, born to be forgotten. But for a short time, it carries something. A thought, a prayer, a poem, and then it's gone. You lie back again, this time just to listen, to birdsong, to water dripping, to the faint crackle of drying pulp. Your hands smell faintly of bamboo and lime. The world smells like steam and ash and quiet work. You take a long breath and let it out. Nothing urgent, nothing loud, Just you. And paper. Your afternoon begins with fire. Not the kind that leaps or roars, but a slow, steady flame that you coax to life beneath the drying shelves. You crouch beside the small clay stove, feeding it bits of pine twigs and split bamboo, each piece chosen carefully so it won't smoke too much or burn too fast. The heat rises gently, warming your knees as the fire sighs into the space. Above you, the shelves hold yesterday's pressed sheets, now stiff and pale ivory. Some have curled a little at the corners. That's fine, a little curve adds character. Others have dried perfectly flat, smooth as silk, humming quietly in the warmth like crickets on a summer night. You slide your fingers over a finished page. The surface is soft, almost like skin. If you hold it to the light, you can see tiny fibers arranged like constellations. Every sheet carries a story, even before ink touches it. The drying takes hours. That's the part most people don't appreciate, the waiting. They ask you how long it takes to make a piece of paper, expecting an answer like an hour or a day. You just smile. Because the truth is, the paper doesn't listen to you. It listens to weather, to air, to mood. Outside, a neighbor calls to his chickens, chasing one under a cart. A small girl runs past your shop with a kite made of leftover scraps. It flutters wildly, a square of failed poetry given new life in the sky. You remember a day, many winters ago, when your own child made a kite just like that. It flew briefly, and then wrapped itself around a pine tree. The child cried. You laughed, and then you both made another. As the paper dries, you check on the pulp. Still soaking. The fibers are settling just right, neither too thick nor too watery. You add a pinch of ash to balance the texture, a trick you learned from an old master who claimed it gave the sheet a more honest soul. Whether that's true or not, historians still argue whether additives like ash or starch were a sign of refinement or cheating. But you trust your hands more than scholars. You can tell by touch what's ready, what's not. The sun moves slowly across the sky. Shadows stretch. A soft wind stirs the edges of hanging sheets. You sip some warm tea brewed with ginger and dried orange peel. It burns a little on the way down, but in a good way. Keeps your bones from stiffening. Around this time, your apprentice usually returns, a quiet boy with ink-stained sleeves and a nervous laugh. But today he's late. Perhaps his grandmother needed help grinding millet. Or perhaps he got distracted again by that market girl with the red sash. You don't mind. At his age, you too were often distracted. You take the opportunity to rest your back against the wall. Outside, a magpie hops on one leg, pecking at something invisible. Inside, the fire purrs. Your fingertips twitch from habit, always feeling for smoothness, for moisture, for the ghost of a wrinkle. Even at rest, your body still dreams of paper. Your thoughts drift to TSA Island. The man some say invented this entire process. A court official, if you believe the old records. He supposedly mixed tree bark and cloth rags and came up with a new writing surface that was cheaper than silk and cleaner than bamboo slips. But some say he merely improved what others had already started. That there were women in the countryside who soaked plants and pressed pulp long before any official gave it a name. Historians still debate whether TSA Island was a genius or just lucky enough to get the emperor's ear. You smile. History's like that, written on someone else's page. By now, the drying paper crackles when you press it gently. You lift a few finished sheets off the rack, stack them neatly, and set them under a flat stone to keep them straight. The weight feels good. Solid. Final. There's a knock. Not the monk this time, but the scholar from the prefecture office. He always arrives in the late afternoon, smelling faintly of lacquer and sandalwood. Today he wants 10 sheets, premium quality, for copying an imperial edict. You ask him what the edict's about. He shrugs. Rice, he says. It's always rice. You hand him a stack, and he slips you a small pouch of copper coins. Enough to buy sweet rice cakes for dinner. Maybe even a new hairpin for your daughter. After he leaves, you stare at the paper he chose. Somewhere down the road, a calligrapher will dip a brush in ink and write something official on that sheet. A clerk will stamp it. A courier will fold it into quarters and carry it by horseback to a distant village. And no one will ever think about the hands that made it. That's the beauty of your work. Invisible, but essential. You stretch your arms, feeling the day in your shoulders. The air smells like sun-dried pulp and pine smoke. The sky outside has shifted into a soft gray blue, and a breeze brings the scent of soy broth from a nearby house. You decide to close the workshop early. As you shut the door, a page floats gently to the ground, landing face up like a fallen petal. You pick it up, smooth it carefully, and place it with the others. No sheet left behind, not even the quiet ones. The next morning begins not with sunlight, but with sound, the delicate splatter of rain on the tiled roof above your head. You open your eyes slowly, listening. It's not a heavy rain, not the kind that floods alleys or chases birds from branches. No, this is a patient, whispering rain, the kind that makes paper breathe deeper. You pull on your work robe, still faintly dusted with pulp flakes, and step out into the courtyard. Rainwater trickles from the eaves in thin, steady lines, and your first thought, naturally, is how it will affect the drying shelves. Paper hates rain, not in the obvious, catastrophic way fire hates water, but in a more insidious sense. Too much moisture in the air, and the fibers cling to each other like old lovers. They ripple, they bend, they rebel. So today, you'll keep the pulp thick. Adjust the mix to dry slower. Paper teaches you patience, whether you want it or not. Inside the workshop, you light the stove again, this time with a few soggy pine needles that hiss a little before catching. The smoke curls lazily upward as if it, too, has nowhere urgent to be. You check the vat, a wooden tub as old as your knees, and stir the pulp with a ladle carved from pearwood. The mixture swirls in cloudy rings. A few stray fibers cling to the side like forgotten thoughts. As you stir, you remember the words of your teacher, who once told you, "Don't chase the sheet. Let it come to you." You didn't understand it at the time. You thought he was just being mysterious, like all old papermakers with long beards and too much tea. But now you know. Every sheet you make is partly luck, partly instinct. No matter how much skill you have, sometimes the fibers refuse to settle. Sometimes the rain comes. Sometimes the bamboo screen splits down the middle and ruins everything. That's just how it is. You pull out your mold, a wooden frame laced with thin silk mesh, used to scoop the pulp. You dip it into the vat slowly, rocking it gently left and right to even out the layer. It's almost meditative, this part. Like watching a pond ripple. Like listening to someone breathe. Once, a passing poet called this step fishing for ghosts. You like that. Still do. With a soft flick of your wrists, you lift the frame, letting the water drain. What's left behind is a pale, glistening sheet, still shapeless, still vulnerable. You lay it down on a felt mat with careful hands. One wrong movement, and the entire thing tears or folds. You place another mat on top, then another wet sheet, then another mat. Layer upon layer, building a quiet mountain of paper and felt, like a sandwich only a monk could love. Eventually, you take the entire stack and press it. Not with your hands, but with a heavy wooden weight passed down from your grandfather. It smells of cedar and thyme. The water squeezes out, dripping into a trough like slow applause. You sit beside the press, rubbing your palms to keep them warm. The rain still murmurs outside. Your apprentice finally arrives, cheeks flushed and hair wet. He bows clumsily and apologizes. Something about a rooster blocking the footbridge. You hand him a cloth to dry off and point toward the molds. He gets to work, copying your movements with admirable focus, if not precision. He's learning. Slowly. While he works, you prepare a batch of dyed pulp. This one colored with indigo, for a merchant who insists on something more striking. You crush the pigment into the mixture, turning the vat a deep blue, like dusk caught in a bowl. The apprentice watches, wide-eyed. He asks if the merchant is important. You shrug. All clients are important, even the ones who don't pay on time. The boy laughs nervously, then dips his own mold into the vat, trying not to tremble. Later that day, a traveling historian stops by. He's old, stooped, with a scroll tube slung over one shoulder and a conical hat that drips steadily onto your floor. He trades a worn page from the Tang dynasty for a small stack of your handmade sheets. As he dries his feet, he tells you the story behind the scroll. Something about a forgotten poetess who once wrote with peach juice during a drought. You pretend not to care, but you listen closely anyway. As the rain lightens, you hang today's batch inside, near the fire. It will take longer to dry this way, but sometimes that's a gift. Slowness can be a kind of kindness. You boil tea for everyone. You, the apprentice, the historian. The kettle sings a lonely note, and steam coils into the air like a brushstroke rising from an unseen hand. The The historian asks you what you think makes a perfect sheet of paper. You answer without thinking. The one that disappears when someone reads. He nods, satisfied, then offers you a piece of candied ginger before heading back into the mist. By nightfall, the clouds are gone. The stars blink into existence, one by one, like ink spots on velvet. You and your apprentice sit quietly in the workshop, each holding a finished sheet to the light. You turn it, just so, to catch the thin watermark, a plum blossom embedded in the fibers. It's delicate, almost invisible, but it's there, like memory, like rain, now gone. You rise early the next morning, long before the rooster calls and the village stirs. The rain has passed, leaving behind a faint scent of wet earth and cedar bark. There's a kind of hush across the world, like it's holding its breath for just a moment longer. You cross the stone courtyard barefoot, relishing the coolness of the flagstones beneath your feet. In the half-light, the drying sheets from yesterday hang like ghostly banners across the rafters. Some are rippled, some stretched taut and smooth. Each one a small gamble against moisture and gravity. You run your fingers over the surface of one, and it feels like the wing of a moth. Today's task is pressing and folding. Not the glamorous parts of papermaking, if glamour even exists in this trade, but necessary. You begin with the first stack, gently peeling each sheet from its felt cradle. The first few come off with ease. Then one tears, right along the edge, as if shy about leaving home. You sigh? Not in frustration, but familiarity. Every papermaker has a drawer full of imperfect sheets. Some you'll patch for notes. Some become envelopes. Some, fire starter. Nothing wasted. Your apprentice arrives late again, muttering something about a stubborn goose this time. You raise an eyebrow, say nothing, and hand him a stack to inspect. He groans at the ripples. You smirk. That's what you get for folding too early. Paper holds grudges. He grumbles, but his fingers move more carefully now. Later, you both settle at the large wooden table where the folding begins. Each sheet is aligned, measured by eye, and creased by hand using a thin strip of polished bone. It's not fast work. It's not even work most people see. But you know how folded paper can change a life. A letter, a poem, a ledger of debts. Your grandmother once wrote love letters on folded mulberry paper. You never read them, but you've kept them in a silk pouch by your bed for years. The ink is faded now, but the fold lines still tell a story, where the paper paused, where it opened like a breath. The apprentice asks why you don't use machines. You point to your hands. These are older. He's not impressed. He says machines are faster. You nod. Then ask him how fast a song should be sung, or a peach should ripen. He blinks. Doesn't answer. You both return to the folds in silence. Outside, the morning fog begins to lift. The sun filters through the paper screens, casting faint grids of light and shadow across the workshop floor. You shift your stool to sit in one, pretending it's a sunbeam throne. By midday, the merchant from the indigo order arrives. He's boisterous and smells faintly of cinnamon and sweat. He waves your paper in the air like a victory flag, declaring it bluer than a moonlit river, which you think might be a compliment. He pays in copper coins and dried persimmons, which you accept with a bow. Barter, after all, is still a kind of poetry. After he leaves, you take a break by the stream behind the house. The water is low today, trickling lazily over smooth stones. You crouch, rinse your hands, and watch the silver minnows dart between shadows. One of them pauses near your fingers, as if curious. In the old days, they say, paper was made from fish skin. You wonder how that felt, how the fibers curled, how the sheets smelt when warm. You hope you never have to find out. You return to the workshop to find your apprentice trying to impress a visitor, your neighbor's daughter, with tales of ancient paper secrets. He's holding the mold backwards. She giggles. You decide to let him flounder a bit before stepping in. Tell her about the time you glued your sleeve to the drying screen, you suggest casually. His face turns the color of fermented bean paste. She laughs harder. Work resumes, and the rhythm of folding returns. The bone folder glides, the paper whispers. You don't speak. The sheets are almost ready for trimming. You take your shears, a curved, well-oiled pair passed down 3 generations, and begin the gentle work of shaping. You measure with a knotted cord, never a ruler. Rulers lie. Cords remember. Each sheet is squared, then trimmed at the edges, leaving thin ribbons of offcut that flutter to the floor like snowfall. Your apprentice collects the scraps in a basket. Later, they'll be soaked and added to the next pulp mix. Even scraps get a second life. As twilight approaches, the day's final task emerges, the seal. You take your carved stamp, a plum blossom inside a circle, and press it into the inkstone. Then, with one careful hand, you apply it to the corner of each finished sheet. The red mark blooms on the pale paper like a sunset on rice fields. The apprentice watches, silent now. Why a plum blossom, he finally asks. You shrug. They bloom in winter. The seal dries quickly. The paper is ready. You stack the sheets gently, wrap them in oiled cloth, and tie them with twine. Another order done. Another day measured in folds and fibers. Outside, the stars return. The moon is high and pale, like a paper lantern drifting in ink-black sky. You close the shutters, bank the coals, and sit for a moment in the stillness. The workshop smells of steam, wood, and faintly, just faintly, of indigo. Your apprentice has gone. The tools are cleaned. The night is yours. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the pulp begins again. The day begins not with sunlight, but with rhythm. A wooden mallet strikes a block. Once, twice again. A steady pulse that echoes across the valley like a heartbeat. You are pounding bark today, fibers softened by days of soaking, now ready for their transformation. You step into the yard where the bark lies in a wooden trough, soaked in clean stream water. Strips of mulberry, bast from paper mulberry trees, once tall and swaying, now reduced to their essence. Soft, pale, fibrous, and full of promise. You raise the mallet, its handle smooth from years of work, and begin. Thud, thud, thud. The sound is heavy, but not angry. Like a drum played in slow motion. Your arms find the rhythm quickly, as they always do. You don't think anymore. You simply fall into the movement. The fibers break down. Their edges fray. They begin to resemble something else entirely. Less bark, more mush. The kind of mush that dreams are made of. The apprentice joins in eventually, eyes still half closed, muttering about how the bark smells like breakfast. You're not sure what kind of breakfast he's had, but you don't ask. Some questions are best left unanswered before tea. You both pound side by side, and for a moment, there is harmony, not just in sound, but in purpose. The sun creeps higher, casting thin shadows between your blows. The air grows warm. A fly lands on your forehead, considers your sweat, and decides to move on. Wise fly. Later, you inspect the pulp with your fingers. It should feel like porridge but stringier, like overcooked noodles in a rice gruel. It's close, but not quite. Another hour. As you continue, your mind drifts. You remember how your teacher once told you the Chinese character for paper combines the radical for silk and speech. At the time, it made little sense. Now you understand. Paper, like silk, carries voices, soft ones, ancient ones. Voices that stretch across time. You also remember his stubbornness. He believed in pounding bark by moonlight, claiming it gave the fibers better memory. Historians still argue whether that was poetic metaphor or genuine belief. Either way, he always smelled faintly of pine sap and ink. You smile at the memory, and your mallet strikes again. Finally, when the pulp is ready, you move it to the vat, an old wooden basin lined with lacquer to prevent leaks. The pulp swirls as you stir, thick and creamy, clouded with potential. Now comes the delicate part. You lower the mold and decal, your wooden frame with its fine mesh screen, into the vat and scoop upward. The water drains. The fibers settle. You give the frame a gentle shake side to side, then front to back, encouraging an even spread. Like settling a baby in a cradle. You lift. A thin sheet forms. The apprentice watches closely. He tries next, too timid on the first dip. The second time, he overcompensates and pulls too much pulp. The sheet sags like wet bread. You gently guide his hands. Let the water do the work, you whisper. Eventually, he gets one close enough to count. You both move the wet sheets to a stack of felts, layering one on top of the other like a tofu sandwich. The felts drink the extra water, holding the sheet's shape. With time and pressure, the fibers will bind into permanence. By now, your back is sore. Your shoulders complain. But your hands? They remember every movement, every shake of the frame, every tilt of the wrist. As the sheets pile up, you begin to think of who will use them. A monk copying sutras in the northern mountains. A tax collector drafting notices in the provincial capital. A young girl scribbling poetry by candlelight. You wonder if they'll notice the flecks of bark you left in. Intentionally, of course. For character. Evening comes, and the sun bathes the yard in gold. You press the final sheet, your hand steady despite the ache. The apprentice tries to whistle, but produces a wheeze that sounds like a teapot having doubts. You laugh, and he grins. You clean the tools, rinse the vat, hang the molds to dry. The yard returns to stillness. Then, almost as an afterthought, you take the first dried sheet from yesterday's batch. You hold it up to the fading light. It glows, thin and strong. You run your thumb along the edge. Smooth, but not too smooth. Honest paper. You write a single character in the corner, just to test the ink. Ong, empty, or sky, depending on your mood. Tonight, it feels like both. You rise the next morning before the light fully stretches across the courtyard. The cool hush of dawn lingers, broken only by the soft creak of the drying racks as they sway gently in the breeze. Today is pressing day. Paper made, but not yet finished. Like dough needing a final bake, it awaits your steady hands to bring it from damp promise to crisp reality. You glance over at the neat stack of felts and sheets you left yesterday. The apprentice has covered them carefully with a cloth, weighted down with stones, just as you taught him. Progress. No stray dogs have wandered in overnight, and there's no sign of the chickens roosting where they shouldn't. An auspicious start. Your first task is to press the sheets, squeezing out every last drop of water. You hoist the wooden lever, worn smooth by generations of makers before you, and carefully lower it down over the stack. The pressure is slow but constant. Not violent, just patient, like a mountain leaning gently on a pebble. As the press groans to life, you sit beside it with your morning tea. It's weak today. Someone forgot the leaves. Again, but the steam warms your face, and that's enough. You flip through the drying sheets from 2 days ago, inspecting the finish. Each one carries its own personality. One is smoother, almost polished. Another has a faint ripple, wind in the vat, perhaps. A few have flecks of gold, where the apprentice accidentally used water from the ceremonial basin again. He swore it was for blessings. You let him believe it worked. Historians still argue whether decorative imperfections like that were mistakes or artistic choices. You know the truth, sometimes both. Around mid-morning, the sun climbs high enough to chase the shadows out of the workshop. Time to hang the freshly pressed sheets. Carefully, you unstack them, each one delicate, still a little damp. You clip them to the drying lines, one by one, the paper dancing slightly as air catches beneath. From a distance, they look like prayer flags. Blank ones, waiting to be written. A neighbor passes by on the road. He stops, leans on the wall, and watches you hang the sheets. Still making clouds, I see, he calls out with a grin. You nod. Better clouds than mud. He chuckles and continues on. Back inside, the apprentice is working on finishing the edges of the dried sheets. His knife work is tentative, but improving. Remember, you say, you're not cutting. You're releasing the paper from what it no longer needs. He raises an eyebrow but follows your advice, trimming slowly, precisely. The curls of edge fall to the floor like snowflakes. You pause to think. Where did you learn that line about releasing? It wasn't your master. Maybe it was your grandfather. He used to say things like that. Or maybe it came from the paper itself, whispering things into your hands when you weren't paying attention. You've long stopped trying to separate what you were taught from what you discovered. By early afternoon, the sheets are crisp. You test one with a brush, running the tip of a black-inked bristle over the surface. The line holds steady, no bleed. That's how you know it's good. A bad sheet will drink too greedily. A good one sips politely. You sigh content. The batch is ready. The apprentice asks if you'll be marking these with your seal. You nod and reach for the red ink and your carved stamp. A simple character, Ja, home. You place it in the corner of each sheet, careful not to smudge. Each press is a quiet announcement. This was made here. With care. With hands. The apprentice watches silently. You let him press the final seal. He hesitates, aligns the stamp, and commits. Perfect. The rest of the afternoon is for bundling and tying. You group the finished papers in stacks of 10, each one wrapped in silk cord and nestled inside a bamboo box. These will go to the monastery downriver. Their monks prefer your paper because, they say, it listens when the brush speaks. You suspect it's because you don't overcharge, but let them have their poetry. You sit back, a dozen finished bundles around you. The smell of pressed fibers and faint ink fills the air. The light has shifted, softer now, golden. Almost time to stop. But before you do, you take one last sheet from the drying line. No reason, just impulse. You sit, brush in hand, and without much thought, begin to write. A simple poem, for lines, about rain on rooftops and cats with muddy paws. Nothing grand, just a passing thought. You let the ink dry, then fold the sheet into a small square and tuck it into your sleeve. Not everything you make needs to leave the workshop. Evening comes with a hush. The golden haze drapes over the tiled roofs like silk, and the paper workshop hums with the gentle tiredness of a day well spent. You sit at the threshold, your knees pulled close, watching the light sink behind the mulberry trees. You used to run through those trees as a child, barefoot, pockets full of bugs and mischief. Now you harvest their leaves to feed the silkworms, whose silk you sometimes use to bind special orders. Funny how the same tree feeds both play and paper. Tonight, there's no order to fulfill, no merchant knocking at your gate. The paper is pressed, sealed, and packed. The floor is swept. The vats are clean. For once, there's nothing pressing, and it unsettles you slightly. You're used to the rhythm, the next task always waiting just behind the last. So you rise, stretch your arms, and walk slowly through the workshop, touching familiar things with your fingertips. The long drying lines, the quiet press, the jar of lotus seeds you snack on when no one's looking. The world feels soft, like it's exhaling. Then, a memory, your old master, humming while sharpening a blade. He never said what the tune was, but it was always the same. You find yourself humming it now, almost involuntarily, as you kneel by the old bamboo mat where you keep your tools. Tonight, you decide, you'll do a bit of repair work. One of the ladles has been splintering at the handle. You sand it down gently, wrap it with thread, and varnish the seam. As it dries, you test your older screens, checking the mesh for tears. It's the kind of work you rarely have time for, but love best. Maintenance. Quiet care. Historians still debate how early paper artisans maintained their tools. Some say with rigorous precision, others think they relied mostly on intuition. You're firmly in the second camp. Tools, like people, don't always need fixing. Sometimes they just want your attention. The apprentice brings in a lantern, and the workshop glows with soft yellow light. Moths flutter toward the flame, unaware of the danger, like poets chasing metaphors. You chuckle at the thought. There's a kind of peace in these hours after labor. You wrap your hands in cloth soaked in chrysanthemum water, a trick you learned from an old traveling brushmaker. It keeps your skin from cracking after long days in the vat. Your master used ox grease, but that always smelled like wet boots. You prefer the flowers. The apprentice asks if he can leave early. There's a festival in the village, and he wants to light a sky lantern. You wave him off with mock gruffness, secretly pleased that he asked instead of sneaking out. Write your wish before you light it, you say. The sky won't read your mind. He laughs and runs out into the dusk, trailing youth like steam from a teacup. Alone again, you sit on your bench and unroll an old scroll. Not a client's, but your own, a record of paper batches made over the years. You note down the day's work, fiber type, soak time, yield. In the margins, you add a note. Apprentice finally trimmed without tearing. Progress. You flip back through older pages and smile at your handwriting. It's grown smaller, neater, more certain. You used to press too hard with the brush, carving each word like a gravestone. Now they float. Outside, the crickets begin their nightly concert. The air cools, and you wrap yourself in a light robe. You step outside and gaze upward. Sure enough, a few glowing lanterns rise into the sky, little stars with secrets inside. You wonder which one is the apprentice's. You reach into your sleeve and unfold the poem you wrote earlier. It's still simple, still true. You don't burn it. You just hold it up toward the lanterns, as if letting them read over your shoulder. Then you fold it again and slip it into a crack in the wall, among other little notes and odd scraps. A private collection of moments you've refused to throw away. Not everything precious needs to be seen. You close the door softly and blow out the lantern. The dark settles gently over your shoulders. The workshop sleeps. And tonight, maybe, so will you. The morning mist curls low across the village rooftops, cloaking the world in soft white breath. You step into your courtyard, cup of tea warming your hands, and listen to the sounds of life returning. Roosters argue in the distance. A merchant's cart creaks by, its wooden wheels sighing under burlap sacks. But your attention drifts not to these daily rhythms, but to the small pile of mail left by the gate. Among the expected, bamboo slips of orders, invoices, polite notes of debt. A letter in a wax-sealed envelope sits like a guest wearing silk in a room of rough linen. Curious, you turn it over. The seal bears the character "For South," pressed in deep red. It's from the prefect of Guangzhou. You break the wax with your thumbnail. The words are formal but enthusiastic. Your paper, your humble, mulberry-based, sun-dried, hand-pressed sheets, have made their way to the provincial court. A visiting scholar wrote an entire treatise on wind patterns on your parchment and praised its smoothness and clarity in the preface. The prefect wants to commission several crates for a series of imperial maps. You blink. You reread. You laugh, startled by the sudden swell in your chest. Your workshop. Your hands. Imperial maps? Of course, scholars and cartographers have existed for centuries, but this request feels personal. Eratosthenes measured the earth with a stick, they say, but someone in your era will chart the rivers of your province with your paper. Not bad for a former apprentice who once dipped an entire sleeve into the pulp vat. You think about the Silk Road merchants you sometimes trade with, how they value rare inks and exotic scrolls. This could change things. More orders, more apprentices, more pressure. Historians still argue whether the southern provinces had paper industries as sophisticated as those in the capital, or whether artisans like you filled a crucial but overlooked role. You're starting to think it's the latter. Unsung, unseen, but indispensable. You tuck the letter into your robe and head inside. The apprentice is already up, yawning over a pile of bamboo frames. Busy day, you say casually, and toss him a cloth. Dust off the good press. We're going to need it. He stares, confused. Why? You grin. Because someone in Guangzhou wants to draw rivers. It's not long before the entire workshop is humming. You make adjustments to your pulp blend, adding extra steamed rice straw for flexibility and a hint of abaca fiber for strength. The result is thicker, sturdier sheets that won't tear when stretched across cartographer boards. It's delicate work, and you lose several batches before getting it right. By mid-morning, the courtyard smells like soaked bark and ambition. You send the apprentice to the market for more screen mesh. When he returns, he brings news. Several scribes are looking for the paper from the south, whispering your name like it's a recipe. Fame. What an odd flavor. Not bitter, exactly, but not sweet, either. You remember your old master once told you, better to be needed than known. You used to think that was just something bitter old men said when no one came to visit. Now you wonder if he was right. Still, you allow yourself one indulgence. You take one perfect sheet, smooth as river ice, pale as winter cloud, and write your name in the corner. Just once. Just this once. Then you fold it and place it on your shelf of rejects. Because one day, someone might want to know who made the maps they relied on. And you hope they find that name, small, neat, floating at the edge of the page. The afternoon wanes. You and the apprentice work side by side, pressing and drawing in rhythm. He sings under his breath. You don't recognize the song. You don't ask. Later, you pause to drink water from a gourd. You wipe your brow. You look at your hands, creased, calloused, faintly stained from the pigments you test now and then. And you smile. This, you think, is what legacy feels like. Not statues or poems or titles, but knowing that something made by your hands might outlive your breath. The apprentice holds up a finished sheet. Is this good enough? He asks. You take it gently, hold it to the light, and nod. It'll carry a coastline, you say. Maybe even a mountain. You wake earlier than usual the next day, stirred by the distant clatter of hooves on stone. A courier arrives just past dawn, his robes dusted from the road, cheeks red from the cold morning air. Without ceremony, he hands you a scroll and bows low. You thank him and unroll the parchment right there, under the half-light of sunrise. It's an imperial notice. Your paper is being reviewed by a delegation of scholars tasked with developing materials for the emperor's archives. A polite note mentions that, should your paper meet certain standards of longevity, the palace scriptorium will begin placing monthly orders. Your eyebrows lift. That's significant. The imperial archive is the belly of history, where records go to outlive dynasties. You lean against the door frame for a moment, feeling the cool grain of the wood against your back. Later, as you rinse fresh pulp and hang the screen frames, your mind wanders to the archives of other ages. Clay tablets buried under Mesopotamian sands. Papyrus scrolls blackened in Egyptian tombs. The Romans, with their ink-stained wax tablets and wooden styluses. But you're a maker of memory in the form of mulberry fiber. You grin and whisper, not bad for bark. Today, you test a new finish, a slight brushing of starch made from ground mung beans. It adds a sheen to the paper, almost like silk, without the cost. Your apprentice watches as you smooth it on with a soft brush. Why does it matter? He asks, puzzled. Because someone, years from now, will run their fingers over this, you say, and they'll feel care. He nods slowly, and that's enough. Later in the day, a scholar arrives, sent from the provincial academy. He's stern-faced, but polite, and spends nearly an hour testing your samples. He unrolls scrolls, scratches characters, sprinkles sand over fresh ink. Finally, he nods once and leaves without a word. You chuckle. Scholars, always mysterious. Historians still debate whether early Chinese paper makers truly understood the chemistry of their craft, or whether their genius was intuitive, passed down through feel and folklore. But you know this. When you dip your fingers into a fresh vat, you know if the mixture is right, just by the way it clings to your skin or floats in the frame like clouds over a pond. There's a wordless wisdom in that. One no imperial official can write into law. By sunset, word spreads that your paper has been acknowledged. That's all anyone says. Acknowledged. But in this trade, that's praise enough to float a kite. The townspeople stop you in the street to ask about your recipe. Some pretend they're asking for a friend. You smile, nod, offer polite nothings. You've learned the difference between sharing and surrendering. You return home to find a small wrapped parcel at your door. Inside, a red silk pouch containing a jade brush rest, shaped like a curled dragon. No note, no signature. But the meaning is clear. Appreciation, from someone who prefers silence to applause. You place the dragon on your work table and stare at it for a long moment. You've become something more than a craftsman. You're a bridge between thought and permanence. You make the thing on which history rests. That night, the moon hangs low and wide over your rooftop. You sit outside with a clay cup of rice wine, legs folded beneath you. A breeze carries the scent of camellia from your neighbor's yard. The apprentice joins you, wordless, settling beside you with his own cup. The silence stretches. Do you think the emperor will write on our paper? He finally asks. You smile. Not the emperor, but someone who writes about him might. He nods, satisfied. It's quiet again, except for the flutter of drying sheets and the low chorus of frogs from the nearby stream. You lean your head back. Stars blink above, indifferent and eternal. But below them, you've left your mark, in pulp, in thread, in soft white sheets that will carry thoughts across time. And that's enough for one lifetime. The next morning arrives soft and silver, clouds veiling the sky in a quiet hush. You walk through your workshop slowly, tracing your fingers across the rims of the vats, checking the damp sheets hanging in even rows like ghostly banners. The scent of mulberry pulp and rice starch lingers in the air, earthy, familiar, almost meditative. Your apprentice enters, holding a folded letter with both hands, almost reverently. Another message, he says. You take it, unfolding the parchment to reveal a delicate hand, scholarly, upright, neat. It's from a historian at the Capitol. He requests a custom set of scroll paper with slightly altered texture for copying ancient manuscripts. The letter is almost embarrassingly polite. You raise an eyebrow. Historians, once distant ivory tower types, now seek you out like artisans of fine tea or carved jade. It's a strange thing, fame by way of fiber. Today's work begins with a new blend, adding just a pinch of hemp fiber for durability. You explain the method to your apprentice, watching his brow furrow in concentration. This one, you say, as he strains the fibers, is meant to last longer than we will. He looks at you with wide eyes. You mean hundreds of years? You nod. Thousands, maybe, if it's stored well. Dry shaded, away from mildew and insects. He exhales slowly, as if the weight of time just landed on his small shoulders. Across the room, the first batch of the day begins to dry, the pulp settling evenly into the screen's fine mesh. You tilt the frame, letting excess water drip away. It's peaceful work. No rush, no noise but the trickle of liquid and the rustle of leaves in the courtyard beyond. The best parts of life, you think, move slowly. Later in the day, a traveler arrives, an elderly man from the southern coast, wrapped in a faded blue cloak. He carries a bamboo case strapped to his back and introduces himself as a map maker. He's heard of your paper from a merchant in Luoyang, and he's traveled weeks to find you. You serve him tea, and he unrolls one of his maps, hand-drawn with meticulous care, each river a ribbon, each mountain shaded like the swell of a sleeping dragon. This one, he says, pointing, was copied onto rice paper last year. The humidity turned it to jelly. He asks for samples. You provide a few. He tests them with a fine-tipped brush, the kind used to draw coastlines with a single confident stroke. The ink sinks in gently, not spreading, not feathering. He smiles a little shyly. This will do. You offer him a bundle to take home, and he bows deeply in thanks. Historians still debate how quickly Chinese papermaking knowledge spread across the continent. Some say it took centuries to leave China's borders. Others argue it traveled rapidly along the Silk Road, carried by curious monks and sharp-eyed traders. But one thing is certain. Your workshop sits at the quiet center of a widening ripple. You don't have maps on your walls, or ledgers of shipments, or scrolls tracking your customers. But you can feel it, your paper moving outward, into temples, archives, libraries, palaces. A soft revolution, sheet by sheet. As twilight falls, your apprentice sweeps the floors while you gently untack the dried sheets from their frames, stacking them with care. You run your palm along the surface of each one. Smooth. Just enough grain. A faint warmth, like sun-soaked linen. Is this batch different? Your apprentice asks, curious. You nod. Slightly heavier. For painting. Someone will paint peonies or cranes across these one day. And they'll last. You look at him, smile. Longer than the painter, longer than the paint. He's quiet a while after that. Dinner is simple that night. Steamed buns and pickled radish, with a bit of ginger tea. You eat in companionable silence, the way only true apprenticeships allow. Before bed, you step outside and stretch your back, listening to the wind thread through the bamboo in the corner garden. The moon peeks through a cloud, milky and round. You wonder where your paper has gone already. If a poet is writing by candlelight in some distant city, your fibers beneath his hand. Or if a child is tracing characters by firelight, struggling to copy the name of a dynasty long past. You hope so, because for every sheet you make, every subtle swirl of pulp, every crease smoothed with your palm, you're not just crafting a product, you're preserving breath, thought, memory. And in the quiet hours of the night, as the vats cool and the ink dries, that feels like enough. The next day, something changes. It begins with a bird. A small one, black and white, with a bright orange patch beneath its beak, perched on the roof beam of your workshop. It sings one perfect note, clear and short, then flutters off. A simple thing, but it lands in your thoughts like a seed. Today feels different. Not urgent, not dramatic, just quietly pivotal, like the turning of a page. You and your apprentice begin early. The new order is for a set of ceremonial scrolls commissioned by a regional governor. Parchments that will be used for ancestral records, family oaths, maybe even temple dedications. The governor wants them to last for generations, which you know translates to make them flawless. You select only the finest mulberry bark for this job. Long fibers, free of blemishes. Boiled, beaten, soaked until it's as smooth as custard. Your apprentice watches as you prepare the screens with extra care, aligning the frames so precisely that the pulp settles without any warping at all. As you lift the frame and tilt it gently, the fibers fall into place like a net catching mist. You hum to yourself, a habit, these days, and the melody floats through the rafters. By mid-morning, a group of students arrives, young scholars from a nearby monastery. Their teacher, a bearded monk with spectacles perched crookedly on his nose, bows to you in greeting. They've studied your paper in theory, he says, but I think it's time they understood it with their hands. You welcome them inside, showing them how to stir the vat, how to feel the difference in viscosity, how to judge a sheet's quality by the sound it makes when flicked, just a whisper, not a slap. They're clumsy at first. One of them drops a whole frame into the vat. Another spills pulp onto her robe. You laugh gently and help them back up. There's no rushing it. you say. Even the water needs time to think. One student, a quiet boy with ink stains on his sleeves, asks how you first learned. You pause a moment. Well, you say, I watched someone who watched someone else. And then I practiced. For years. And then, one day, the paper started listening back. They don't quite know what that means, but you see a few of them write it down anyway. After they leave, the workshop feels fuller, warmer, as if the walls themselves absorbed their questions. You take a break and sit in the courtyard, sipping a bowl of chrysanthemum tea. The flowers are just beginning to bloom, yellow heads nodding in the breeze. A memory returns, your own teacher, long ago, dipping his hand into the vat beside you. This, he had whispered, is how empires leave behind their dreams. At the time, it had sounded grand. Now, you understand it in a quieter way. Not all dreams are banners or battles. Some are recipes. Some are lullabies. Some are fragments of thought pressed into mulberry pulp. Historians still wonder exactly how much early papermaking influenced the Tang dynasty's cultural explosion, whether it was paper that enabled the poetry or the poetry that demanded the paper. You suspect it was both. That evening, you and your apprentice finish drying the ceremonial sheets. You stack them gently, lay them between two lacquered boards, and weigh them with stones. Your apprentice lingers nearby. Do you think people will remember who made them? He asks. You chuckle softly. Probably not, you say, but they'll remember what was written on them. He frowns. That doesn't seem fair. No, you agree. But it's enough. Later that night, as you oil the hinges on the storage chest and prepare the bundles for delivery, you find a scrap of paper tucked beneath a board. A test sheet, coarse, uneven, a mistake from months ago. You hold it up to the lamplight. It's imperfect, but honest. You smile, and instead of burning it, you slide it into a drawer. Because not every page needs to be perfect. Some just need to be real. And that, perhaps, is a kind of immortality too. The following morning, you awaken before the sun. It's a soft, blue hour. The world is still yawning, stretching, not quite ready to begin. But you are. Today, you're visiting a bamboo grove on the hillside beyond the village. Your apprentice walks beside you, half awake, clutching a bundle of tools and yawning into the rising fog. His sandals squelch with dew as you follow the path winding upward through terraced fields. You've been here many times. The grove is where you gather your finest bamboo, the splinters that will become brushes, the stalks that'll form drying rods or paper screens. But there's something sacred about arriving just as the mist curls between the shoots, when the leaves drip with quiet and the birds haven't quite agreed to begin singing. You show your apprentice how to judge a bamboo's readiness. The older stalks, pale at the bottom, green-gold near the top, those are perfect. They have memory, as you like to say, fiber that's learned to flex without breaking. He marks them with a small knife, careful not to scar the others. You nod, satisfied. This kind of discernment takes years. As you begin cutting, you fall into rhythm. Chop, pull, strip, stack. The sound is soothing, like a metronome ticking beneath thought. Every so often, you pause to rub your wrist or admire the view below. Rooftops layered like fish scales, smoke rising from breakfast fires. There's a serenity to the labor. It reminds you that craft isn't always in the act of making, but in preparing to make. On the walk home, your apprentice asks a dozen questions. Why does thicker bamboo crack more? How do you know which end to dry first? What makes one rod stronger than another? You answer patiently, even when he asks things you've explained before. Some knowledge has to pass through repetition before it can settle. That afternoon, back at the workshop, you prepare the bamboo strips for drying. You align them carefully on the rack, like sunbathers facing the right direction. It takes a keen eye. If they warp, the paper screens will never lie flat. Your apprentice begins constructing a new drying frame. You watch him measure, cut, lash the pieces together with twine. It's a little crooked, but sturdy. Well done, you say. He beams. You reward yourselves with steamed buns from the food vendor down the road. Sweet bean for you. Pork and scallion for him. You sit beneath the eaves, chewing slowly, watching the townspeople shuffle by. One woman carries a stack of letters tied with red thread. A boy chases a hoop with a stick. An old man sits cross-legged, mending a fishing net. Paper connects them all, in ways they don't even think about. It's hidden in contracts, prayers, tax scrolls, love notes. It lives quietly, like breath. You think about the earliest papers you ever made, how flimsy they were, how proud you were when one didn't tear. Now, even your scraps are more durable than many others' finished sheets. And still, you strive for better. Not for praise, not even for profit, just for the joy of the craft. Historians often debate when Chinese papermaking truly reached its golden age. Was it during the Tang dynasty's explosion of literature? Or later, with the spread of woodblock printing? Some argue it was long before that, in humble workshops like yours, with nameless artisans refining their tools one bamboo sliver at a time. You like that idea? By twilight, the bamboo has begun to harden. You test a strip, it sings when plucked, like a zither string. Perfect. You and your apprentice return the tools to their chest, brush the sawdust from your sleeves, and light a single lamp. The glow spreads across the drying paper, the bamboo rods, the ink pots waiting on the shelf. Everything glows amber and quiet. He leans against the wall and sighs. Do you ever get tired of it? You tilt your head. Of what? He gestures around. This. Making the same things. Over and over. You consider it. No, you say softly. Because it's never quite the same. Paper remembers your hands. Even when you think you're doing it the same way, it responds differently. Like a conversation. He frowns. So the paper's talking back. You smile. Not in words, but in texture, in sound, in how it dries. You'll hear it, eventually. He closes his eyes. I hope so. The lamp flickers. Outside, the bamboo grove whispers. And inside, a craft older than most empires quietly continues. Tonight, a scholar arrives at your workshop. He is old and thin, wrapped in a robe that's more ink-stained than silk. His beard is long and uneven, like brushstrokes left in haste. He leans on a walking stick shaped like a gnarled root. You recognize him at once. Master Liu, a poet and archivist who once copied imperial records by hand for the regional governor. He speaks softly, as if every syllable weighs something. I hear you make paper that listens, he says with a smile. You chuckle, only if you whisper to it. He bows in amusement and lays out his request. He needs 50 sheets for a collection of poems, each dedicated to a friend who has passed. He wants the paper to feel like breath, he says, something the wind might carry without tearing. That's not a specification you hear every day, but you like it. You begin at dawn. For this paper, you choose your finest mulberry fibers, ones that feel like soft thread between your fingers. You boil them in clean mountain water, skimming the surface foam with a curved ladle carved from a single gourd. The scholar sits near the window as you work. He watches without speaking, occasionally jotting notes into a small stitched booklet. His penmanship is so tiny, it looks like insects marching in formation. As the pulp cools, you reflect on the nature of memory. This man is trying to trap the essence of his friends in words, and hoping your paper will hold it. You admire that. You stir the pulp in the vat, watching it swirl like cloud soup. Each sheet you draw from it is a prayer, almost gentle, airy, as though you're lifting fog with your frame. Some sheets come out too thin and buckle as they dry. Others look promising, even before they're pressed. Your apprentice helps you inspect them, holding each one up to the light. This one sings, he says of one. This one hums. You nod. He's learning the language. That night, the scholar recites one of his poems by the fire. It's about a friend who once raced dragon boats with a mouth full of oranges. The poem is funny and sad, and shaped like a memory you didn't know you missed. The next morning, you show him the finished sheets, translucent as onion skin, yet sturdy enough to last a generation. He runs his hand across them, murmurs something like, perfect, and begins writing that very afternoon. The scratching of his brush against your paper is hypnotic. It's a soft, persistent sound, like a mouse nibbling on dreams. You serve him tea. He pours some into a saucer and offers it to the spirits of the room. You're not sure if it's for the ancestors, the poems, or the paper itself. Scholars still argue whether Chinese paper should be seen as an invention or a discovery. Was it born of accident or centuries of steady refinement? Some say the earliest makers were copying silk textures. Others believe it was about capturing river mist in solid form. Most agree, though, that it was artisans, not nobles, who carried the craft to greatness. You and the scholar work in near silence for days. Words take shape. Paper absorbs them. The world beyond the walls slips away. At one point, he asks about your past, how you came to this village, why you never left. You answer with a shrug. Paper is patient, you say. It waits for you to be ready. He smiles like he understands. On the final day, you help him bind the 50 sheets into a single scroll. He adds no cover, no title, just a thread of gold cord to tie it shut. I'll return when I have more ghosts to feed, he says as he departs. You nod. We'll be here. When he's gone, the workshop feels quieter than usual. Even the brushes seem to rest differently on their hooks. You sit by the window, sip the last of the tea, and stare at a sheet of unused paper left behind. It looks blank, but somehow it feels full. You wake to the sound of distant laughter, faint, drifting down the valley like birdsong from a dream. It's market day, and the village is bustling. Baskets of ginger, woven fans, pickled turnips, and sweet bean cakes line the path outside. Children chase each other with paper pinwheels. Merchants shout with cheerful exaggeration. You walk through the morning haze, cradling a bundle of your finest paper and cloth. Today isn't for selling, it's for trading. There's a potter who owes you a set of bowls. A tailor has promised you a scrap of dyed silk for new pressing boards. As you pass, people nod respectfully. The papermaker, they say. The one whose sheets don't yellow with time. The one whose scrolls resist mold and carry ink like silk carries scent. You offer a sheet to the fanmaker, an elderly woman with hands like curled bark. She squints through her cataracts, touches the edge with reverence. Like dried mist, she whispers. She gives you 2 hand-painted fans in return. Later, in the shadow of the tea pavilion, a traveling monk from Sichuan performs a short chant in thanks for your gift. You'd made him funeral paper for his teacher last winter, folded into little horses and lanterns that burned without smoke. He tells you your paper carried the spirit cleanly, with no snag. You pretend to bow modestly, but inside, your heart does a quiet dance. Back at the workshop, your apprentice has prepared a surprise. He's laid out old scraps of failed sheets, offcuts, trimmings, pieces with ink blotches, and arranged them into a sort of collage on the wall. It looks like a dragon, if you squint, or a map of a land that never was. I didn't want to waste them, he says. They still have something. You nod, unexpectedly moved. Everything has something. Historians still debate what made ancient Chinese paper so superior to later European kinds. Was it the longer mulberry fibers? The lack of heavy chemical sizing? Or the climate itself, damp enough to work with, but dry enough to preserve? Some say it was philosophy. Paper wasn't just material, it was medium, a bridge between silence and speech. You sit with your apprentice and show him how to repair tears with thin rice paste and pressure. Together, you resurrect a nearly ruined scroll, one whisper-thin line at a time. When you lift the finished repair to the window, the patch is nearly invisible. He gasps. How did you do that? You smile. With patience, and a very clean brush. That night, you write something yourself. Not a poem, or a journal entry. Just the description of the sound of wind through bamboo. You use your oldest inkstone, one that smells faintly of sandalwood. The ink moves slowly, the brush dances gently. Writing on your own paper feels different, more naked, more sacred. You fold the page and slip it into the wall behind the workshop stove, a place only you know about. For no one's eyes but yours. Or maybe for someone someday. You remember an old saying, paper lives longer than the hand that made it. You've seen scrolls passed down like heirlooms, letters preserved in lacquered boxes, prayers hidden in temple beams. Paper doesn't breathe, not in the usual way, but it absorbs. Ink, scent, time, touch, even regret. Especially regret. One winter, years ago, a traveler brought you a single character burned into a slip of birch bark. It was his father's last word before exile, return. He wanted to copy it onto something that would not crumble in rain. You made him a strip of heavy flax-laced paper and watched him press the symbol in gold leaf. It shimmered like fire in candlelight. I'll carry this until I can, he said, and never explained what that meant. You never saw him again, but you remember his face, and the way he looked at the paper, not as a product, but as a promise. You still keep a scrap of that batch tucked into your apron. For luck. Outside, night deepens. The village quiets. The market stalls disappear, replaced by the hum of frogs and distant flutes. Lanterns sway like sleeping stars. Inside, the workshop is warm. Paper dries on racks like pale flags of peace. The glue pot murmurs. The inkstone cools. Your apprentice is already asleep on a pile of rags. You dim the lamps and sit for a moment, just breathing, just listening to the silence that only paper can hear. Morning comes slowly now, not like when you were young, leaping from sleep with energy you didn't know how to spend. Now, it creeps in gently, through cracks in the shutters, across the papered windows, in the quiet rustle of mulberry trees shedding dew. You stretch, joints popping faintly, and pad barefoot across the creaky floor. Your apprentice is already up, out fetching water. He's humming that odd little tune again, the one with no name. You light the fire, check the pulp buckets, brush your fingers through the vat like a tea master gauging steepness. The paper isn't finished today, but it's never finished, not really. You understand that now. It's a conversation between the plant and the hands, between water and waiting, between now and what comes after. You think about the scrolls that will outlive you, the poems no one's read yet, the birth records and trading ledgers and tiny gods painted in secret on your finest vellum. Pieces of you dispersed, quiet, anonymous, and still alive. Your apprentice returns, red-cheeked from the cold, balancing 2 steaming buckets. You both prepare the pulp, mixing in a bit of old linen, just to see how it blends. A gamble. But then, so much of life is a gamble. He asks questions while you stir, about sizing and drying times, and why some paper rustles louder than others. You answer, but not all the way. Some things he needs to discover on his own. You were the same. Later, you take him into the hills again, to the stream where the best kozo bark grows. He brings his own knife this time, and you let him cut without watching too closely. He's ready. That night, over a bowl of cabbage stew, he says he wants to build his own press. Different style. Smaller. Portable. He's been sketching it on scrap paper. You nod. Tell him you're proud. Tell him it might not work, but he should try anyway. Then, you go outside. Just for a minute. The moon is fat and low, casting silver across the rooftops. Smoke curls from chimneys. A cat slips along the garden wall. You hold one sheet of today's paper to the sky. It's nearly translucent in the moonlight. You can see the fibers dancing faintly inside, like frozen breath or the ghosts of willow leaves. There's a kind of holiness to it. Not loud or grand. Just quiet. Just there. Your body aches more now, but you don't mind. You've spent yourself on something that will last. Maybe that's all anyone can ask. You tuck the sheet into your sleeve and return inside, where the lamps are low and the ink is waiting. And as the door clicks softly shut behind you, the night exhales and settles. Let the world soften around you now. The workshop is quiet. The fire has burned down to embers, glowing orange in their cradle of ash. Outside, the trees sway gently, brushing their leaves together like pages of a book turning in slow motion. You sit back, close your eyes. The scent of mulberry bark still lingers in the air, faintly sweet, earthy, and warm. The kind of smell that clings to memory, not clothes. You breathe it in. Let it settle behind your ribs like calm. All around you, paper dries in silence. Some sheets ripple slightly in the breeze, as though dreaming of the stories they'll hold. Letters waiting to be written. Names not yet imagined. Sketches that will one day make someone pause and smile. You've done your part. The ink stains on your hands, the creak in your spine, the songs hummed under your breath while stirring pulp. All of it was the work. All of it was enough. Let that be your peace. Let that be your rest. Tonight, you don't need to solve or build or teach or even remember. You only need to be still. The paper will keep. The world will wait. So let your breath slow. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let your thoughts soften like silken water. And drift, 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 into dreams as quiet and enduring as the finest paper ever made. Sweet dreams.